The night was thick with silence, the kind that presses against your ears and makes every creak of the old farmhouse feel like a gunshot. Daniel Harper, a wiry man of 54 with calloused hands and a heart still bruised from loss, slept alone in the sagging bed he'd once shared with his wife, Ellen. The clock on the nightstand glowed 2:17 a.m. when the sound of shattering glass ripped him from a restless dream. His breath caught, heart hammering as he fumbled for the phone beside him. The security system newly installed and supposedly state-of-the-art remained eerily silent. Downstairs, heavy footsteps thudded with purpose, not the clumsy shuffle of drunken kids, but the deliberate rhythm of men who knew what they wanted. "Someone's in my house," he whispered into the 911 line, voice trembling as he gave his address at 47 Willow Creek Lane, a 5-acre patch of farmland clinging to the edge of the gleaming Crestwood Heights development. "Units dispatched," the operator replied. "ETA, 17 minutes. "Stay hidden, sir. 17 minutes. Out here, on the fringes of civilization, where the nearest neighbor was a manicured lawn away, that might as well have been an eternity." Daniel slid from the bed, bare feet silent on the worn hardwood, and pressed himself into the corner of his bedroom closet. The space smelled of mothballs and Ellen's old wool coats, a scent that twisted his gut with memory. He clutched the phone to his chest, listening as voices filtered up from below. 3 men, clipped and efficient. "Check the office for the safe," one said, his tone sharp. "Should be behind that painting of the hermit, pacing the floor beneath the painting, muttered something Daniel couldn't catch. Then another voice, closer. "Boss said the family heirlooms are in the master bedroom. Check the closet." Daniel's blood turned to ice. How did they know about the safe? It was a small, steel box hidden behind Ellen's watercolor of the farm at Sunrisea piece she'd painted the summer before the cancer took her. Inside it were his grandfather's silver pocket watch, her wedding ring, and a few other treasures no one outside the family could have known about. The closet door creaked open. A flashlight beam sliced through the darkness, missing him by inches as it swept past the coats. "Someone's been sleeping here," one of them said, voice low and tense. Bed still warm. Footsteps edged closer. Daniel held his breath, every muscle coiled. Windless settler's irons wailed in the distance. "Time's up," the leader snapped. "Grab what you have and go." Car doors slammed. Engines roared, and then silence swallowed the night again. When the police arrived, they found Daniel still crouched in the closet, shaking too hard to speak. The damage was staggering. Overdue law, $400,000 in losses of replaceable heirlooms, antique farming tools Ellen's father had forged, and the safe's contents gone. "This wasn't random," Detective Sarah Voss said, her sharp eyes tracing the neatly severed wires of the alarm system. They knew exactly what they were after and where to find it. Daniel's farm had been his sanctuary, a stubborn holdout against the encroaching sprawl of Crestwood Heights. For generations, the Harpers had tilled this soil, raised cattle, and weathered storms both literal and figurative. After Ellen's death 4 years ago, Daniel had leaned on his 2 Great Pyrenees, Titan and Celine, for companionship and protection. The massive white dogs, bred to guard livestock from wolves, patrolled his land with a quiet ferocity that kept trouble at bay. They were gentle giants with him. Celine once lay still for an hour while a calf napped against her side, but to strangers, their deep barks and towering presence were a warning few ignored. Trouble had started brewing 6 months earlier, when a certified letter arrived from the Crestwood Heights Homeowners Association. The paper was crisp, the seal embossed in gold. "Saw your dogs have been deemed excessively aggressive and disruptive to community harmony. Immediate action required." Saw it bore the signature of Margaret Voss, no relation to the detectivia, steely woman with a penchant for Chanel suits and a smile that never warmed her eyes. She'd been elected HOA president 3 months prior and lived in the sprawling Tudor that butted up against Daniel's eastern fence. She made no secret of her disdain for his eyesore farm, once cornering him at the local diner to suggest he sell to developers who'd turn his fields into cul-de-sacs. Daniel tried reasoning with her. He and VY Ted her to the farm, showed her how Titan moved carefully among the chickens, how Celine nudged lambs back to their mothers with a tenderness that belied her size. Their livestock guardians, he'd explained, voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. Protective, not aggressive. This farm's been here since before your streets had names. Margaret's response was a tight-lipped smile. The deed restrictions apply to adjacent properties, Mr. Harper. Your grandfather clause has limits. The harassment came fast and relentless. Photos of Titan and Celine at the fence line appeared in his mailbox daily, each stamped with a violation notice. A high-pitched noise emitter sprouted overnight near his pasture, DRIVYing the dogs into a frenzy. Neighbors he'd never met filmed his property from their decks, their phones glinting in the sun. At an HOA meeting, Margaret turned it into a circus. Mr. Harper refuses to see the danger these beasts pose, she declared, clicking to a slide of plummeting property values. A young mother, Lisa Grayson, stood up bewildered. My son loves those dogs. He calls them his fluffy friends. This is nonsense. But Margaret steamrolled on, and the board stacked with her allies voted. 30 days to confine the dogs away from the property line or face law 100 daily fines per dog. Daniel consulted lawyers, but the news was bleak. The HOA had leveraged county nuisance ordinances, GIVYing them legal teeth. Fighting it would cost law $20,000 up front, with no promise of winning. The fines began piling up, eating into the slim profits from his herd. Margaret delivered each notice herself, her heels clicking on his gravel drive, her satisfaction barely veiled. Then came the day she crossed the line literally. She strode onto his property Yunin VY Ted, clipboard in hand, snapping photos. You're trespassing, Daniel called, emerging from the barn as Celine's bark echoed behind him. This is an official inspection, she snapped, but as she turned to leave, she left the gate ajar. Celine bounded forward, not attacking, but herding the intruder out as she'd been trained. Margaret's scream pierced the air, her stilettos sinking into mud as she fled, shrieking about VY Sias beasts. The fallout was swift. A VY row, photo Margaret running, Celine in pursuit, Daniel stun-fueled an emergency HOA meeting. Despite expert testimony praising the dogs Biha VY, or the board branded them dangerous. The county sheriff arrived with a court order, confined Titan and Celine to an enclosed structure or remove them entirely. Daniel's nephew, Ethan, took them to his ranch 30 miles west. Watching them leave, their puzzled eyes peering from the truck's window, cracked something deep in Daniel's chest. Without the dogs, the farm felt exposed. The security system Margaret had pushed CIVY Liz protection. She'd called it came with a salesman who seemed too eager, financing prearranged for properties like his. Within days, kids trespassed through his fields. Someone loosened bolts on his tractor. The sheriff brushed off his reports. Rural mischief. Nothing we can prioritize. At the next HOA meeting, Margaret crowed about rising property values and hinted at developers eyeing his land for Crestwood Heights Phase 2. Daniel caught her exchanging a glance with a stranger-tailored suit, cold eyes like they were sealing a deal. The break-in shattered any illusion of safety. As Detective Voss pieced together the crime scene, neighbors murmured condolences, but suspicion gnawed at Daniel. Margaret arrived at dawn, polished and poised. This is why we need better security, she said, voice dripping with rehearsed concern. Voss's gaze lingered on her. Mr. Harper mentioned his dogs would have stopped this. Pros often target places without them first thing they check. Margaret's smile faltered, and she hurried off. Voss quietly snapped a photo of her car. 3 days later, a knock startled Daniel. Ryan Tate, a young HOA board member who'd abstained on the dog vote, stood on his porch, clutching a manila folder. This could get us both in trouble, he said, glancing over his shoulder. Inside, he spread out photos. Margaret meeting a sharp-faced man in a silk tie 2 days before the robbery. That's Victor Lang, Ryan whispered. Her ex-brother-in-law. Did time for running burglary crews. Text followed. Saw dogs are gone. Farmer moved them last week. Crews ready. Layout with valuables marked safe behind painting, antique tools. 20 fan tram, finder's fee. Saw Ryan's voice shook. She's been skimming HOA funds due $250,000 over 5 years. But the real play's the land. She's buying up options through shell companies, tanking values with harassment, then flipping it to developers. Why tell me? Daniel asked, throat tight. Because you're not the first, Ryan said. 4 other edge properties, same pattern. HOA pressure, security changes, break-ins. The Carter place is next. He handed over bank records, photos, everything. Daniel called Voss. The detective didn't arrest Margaret outright. We need her crew and the stolen goods, Voss explained. Daniel agreed to bait the trap. At an HOA meeting, he stood, voice raw. I'm selling the farm. Can't feel safe here anymore. Margaret beamed. We'll miss your charm, she lied. Ryan chimed in. Estate sale this weekend, antiques, collectibles. That night, undercover cops watched Margaret scope his property, photographing valuables, police decoys with trackers. At 2 a.m., Victor and 2 others tripped the sting, walking into cuffs. A raid on Victor's warehouse recovered Daniel's heirlooms, plus loot from 3 other farms. Margaret's arrest was a spectacle, handcuffs clinking as neighbors filmed. Charges stacked up: conspiracy, theft, embezzlement, fraud. She'd bankrolled her Prada bags with HOA cash and burglary cuts, using property values as a smokescreen for a multi-million-dollar land grab. The HOA dissolved, restructured under Ryan, who greenlit Working Dogs farm-wide. Titan and Celine returned to Cheers, a fundraiser fixing Daniel's fences for their patrol. The community shifted. Neighbors apologized, brought casseroles, asked about the dogs. Daniel hosted a barbecue. Kids fed Titan carrots, learned how guardians differ from pets. They're bred to protect, he told them, and they exposed what we couldn't see. Ryan, now president, gave Daniel a plaque. The HOA charter featured a Pyrenees silhouette. Healing spread as records unveiled Margaret's playbook, targeting rural edges, forcing vulnerabilities, staging crimes to scare owners into selling cheap to her shell firm. A twist came late. Deputy Klein, a quiet man who'd ignored Daniel's calls, confessed. Margaret paid him to look away. Her endgame? Use break-in fear to assemble a mega parcel for condos due $30 million potential. Klein's testimony sealed her fate. Daniel joined the safety committee, Titan and Celine as consultants. Their story rewrote pet rules across 3 HOAs VY, or overlooks. What seems scary isn't always the threat, Daniel told VY Siders, patting Celine's flank. And what smiles can hide the real danger. They knew it all along. At dusk, Titan stood watch, eyes gleaming, not aggressive but ready. Exactly as he was meant to be. If you were the one in this story, how would you react? Would you stand up and fight back, or accept the unreasonable pressure and control from the HOA? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this VY Deo with more people. Your small action gives us the motivation to keep bringing you more intense and engaging stories. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next VY Deo.